I was 27 when it happened, 2016 to be exact. Back then, I lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. It wasn't fancy by any stretch. The paint on the window frames was flaking like dry skin. The kitchen barely fit 2 people without brushing elbows, and the bathroom was so narrow you had to shuffle sideways just to shut the door behind you. Still, it was mine. At least it had been mine until 3 months before everything went sideways. That was when my roommate, Leah, decided, out of nowhere, that she was moving in with her boyfriend. She gave me 2 weeks' notice. Just like that, I was left holding a rent bill I couldn't possibly manage alone. I remember one night especially clear, sitting at the wobbly kitchen table, laptop open, staring at my bank app. My checking balance glared back at me, mocking me with how little it held. My stomach was tight, my chest buzzing with stress. My job in customer service barely covered my half of the rent. Paying the full amount was impossible. I needed a solution and I needed it fast. That's when the idea hit me, Airbnb. I'd stayed in a couple on road trips with friends. I thought, why not flip it around? I had a spare room. It wasn't much, but it could work. My parents pitched in a spare bed, a small dresser, and a few knickknacks to make the room look a little warmer. It wasn't stylish, but in pictures it came across as cozy. Within 2 weeks, my listing was live. Cozy private room in uptown apartment. And to my surprise, it actually worked. For the first few weekends, I had couples passing through or solo travelers in town for concerts. I'd check them in Friday after work, then head to my parents' place for the weekend, giving them privacy and myself peace of mind. Easy money. For a while, I even felt proud of myself, like I'd actually outsmarted the mess Leah had left me in. But then there was Kenny. I'll never forget the first message he sent. His profile photo gave me an uneasy feeling, though I couldn't pin down why at the time. Pale skin, greasy black hair like he cut it himself, and dark eyes that seemed too intense for a simple booking site. His bio read, musician, love art, and deep conversations, looking for cool places to stay. His first message was short. Hey, I like your place. Is it available this weekend? Nothing about it was alarming. Still, something stuck to me. Something in the way I felt stared at through the screen. He booked 2 nights. When I confirmed, he sent back, awesome. Can't wait to meet you. It was just a smiley face, but it made my stomach tighten. I brushed it off. People are awkward online all the time, right? When Friday came, I was still vacuuming the living room when his text came through. Hey, just letting you know I'm here. I glanced at the time, 10:05 a.m. Check-in wasn't until 3. I typed back quickly, hi Kenny, thanks for letting me know. I'm still getting the room ready. Check-in is at 3. Feel free to grab lunch or something in the meantime. 5 minutes later, no worries. I'll just wait outside. That same unease rippled through me again. I shook it off and kept cleaning. When 3 hours finally rolled around, I opened my door to find him sitting cross-legged in the hallway, right against my door like he'd been waiting there all day. He sprang up, grinning wide. His black hoodie was plastered with band patches, ripped jeans hanging loose around his frame. He smelled faintly of cigarettes. Hey, you must be Mia, he said, voice too cheerful, almost rehearsed. Yep, that's me, I answered, forcing a polite smile. I handed him the keys. Room straight down the hall on the left. You're not staying here? His eyes darted past me like he expected to see someone else inside. Nope. I'll be out of your hair for the weekend, I said quickly, lifting my overnight bag. Cool, cool. He nodded, still smiling. I stepped into the hall, pulling the door shut behind me. As I started walking, his voice followed me down the corridor. You can talk to me, you know. I'm a nice guy, I didn't reply. My gut whispered something sharp, something I didn't want to admit. That guy is trouble. And he was. Over the next month, Kenny became a regular. Always booking last minute. Always grabbing the weekends like he'd been waiting for me to post availability. At first, I told myself it was fine. Consistent money, predictable guest. Then the texts started. At first, harmless questions. Hey, what's the Wi-Fi password again? Do you have a toaster? Then they slipped sideways into something else. What kind of soap do you use in the shower? Which bed do you sleep on? I stopped answering after that. I kept telling myself Kenny was just awkward. Maybe lonely. That's what I clung to whenever his texts made my skin crawl. But deep down I knew better. I even started making excuses to my parents for why I didn't want to keep renting out the spare room. Every time I swore I'd stop, and then rent would come due and I'd cave. Money over safety. The first time I heard it, I was half asleep. A faint creak like someone putting weight on the hallway floorboards. My eyes flew open. My heart was instantly pounding, that primal alarm bell in my chest screaming, "Wrong." I lived alone. I sat up, straining to listen. Nothing. Just silence. Then, a soft thud from the kitchen. I grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a big metal flashlight, and crept toward the sound. The apartment was pitch black, shadows stretching long across the floor from the faint streetlight outside. The front door was still locked. Nothing out of place. Old buildings, I muttered to myself. They make noises. I went back to bed, but it didn't stop. Sometimes it was that same creak, slow and deliberate, like footsteps. Other times it was a soft door hinge groaning somewhere in the dark. Once I could swear I heard breathing, right outside my bedroom door. Every time I'd get up, check, confirm the lock was still bolted. Every time, nothing. I started sleeping with a knife on my nightstand. Finally, one weekend, I decided to stop hosting altogether. I blocked my Airbnb calendar, told my parents I needed some quiet time to myself, and stayed home. For the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale. No guests, no texts, no strangers. Just me. That peace lasted until Sunday night. I had just gotten back from the grocery store. The apartment was quiet as I unpacked bags, humming to myself while I slid the milk into the fridge. I felt almost normal, tired but happy. I went to the bathroom to wash up before bed. I flicked the light switch and froze. Kenny was standing there in my bathroom, in my home. He was holding one of my kitchen knives. My whole body went cold, blood draining from my face. He pressed the blade to my throat with a sick smile. "You're all mine now," he whispered, voice low, intimate in the worst possible way. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. My voice shook. "Kenny, please. You can stay here if you want, just don't do this." His expression twisted into something darker. "Don't bargain with me." He shoved me back step by step. "I'm going to get exactly what I want." I stumbled into my bedroom, and before I could scream, his hand clamped over my mouth. The knife grazed my skin, cold and sharp. My body went rigid. The next minutes were a blur of terror and suffocating helplessness. The weight of him pinning me down, the press of steel at my throat, my muffled sobs trapped beneath his palm. Minutes felt like hours, stretching into something endless and unbearable. When it was over, he rifled through my drawers, pulling out my phone, my wallet, anything he could take. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. "You tell anyone," he hissed, "and I'll come back. I have a key." Then he was gone. I sat there trembling, my whole body vibrating with shock. Locking the door felt pointless now, but I did it anyway, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the latch. I grabbed my old iPad and messaged my parents with fingers that could barely type. They called 911 for me. I couldn't form the words. I sat huddled in the corner of my bedroom, gripping the knife he'd left behind, waiting for the sirens. 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. When the police finally arrived, they searched the area, but Kenny was nowhere. Thankfully, his Airbnb profile had his real name and address. They arrested him the next day. The investigation uncovered the truth that still makes me nauseous. Kenny had made a copy of my apartment key weeks earlier. He had been sneaking in while I was gone, watching me sleep, watching me undress, probably doing things I don't even want to imagine. The noises at night weren't the building. They were him. When I blocked my Airbnb listing that weekend, it must have triggered him. He snapped. I broke my lease immediately. I couldn't spend another night there. I moved back in with my parents and haven't lived alone since. It's taken me years to write this down. Even now, my hands tremble as I type. I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored, the way his texts crossed the line, the smiley face that unsettled me, the fact that I let a stranger have keys to my home. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly safe again. I never used to be the type of person who double-checked reviews. I'd glance at a star rating, maybe skim a line or two and call it good enough. That changed after the cottage. This all went down a few years back when I was still with my ex, Rachel. By then we'd been together for almost 3 years, comfortable but still trying to surprise each other. Her birthday always landed smack in the middle of December, right when holiday chaos hit its peak. Relatives, work parties, obligations stacked on top of one another. I thought I'd be clever and pull her out of all that. Just a couple of quiet days, just us. Something low-key but thoughtful. The kind of gesture that says, "I see you. I'm paying attention." Rachel was teaching then, and I was freelancing as a graphic designer, which meant for once our schedules actually lined up. It felt like a rare chance to do something that mattered. I didn't grow up with fancy trips or even weekend getaways, so booking a place felt like this grown-up way of proving I could make the effort, that I wanted to. The plan had been simple: a boutique hotel in Vermont, something with a fireplace and good sheets, remote but not impossible to get to from Boston. But I waited too long. By the second week of December, every room was gone or going for prices that made my stomach turn. Even grimy motels had jacked up their rates. That's how I ended up doom-scrolling Airbnb at midnight, frustrated, when I stumbled across a listing near some little town in New Hampshire called Whitlow Pines. I'd never heard of it. The house was 3 stories, wooden, built in that faux rustic style. The pictures made it look a little tired, but not awful. Old rugs, mismatched furniture, a wraparound porch half buried in snow. Out of desperation, I clicked. Only 2 reviews. One described it as peaceful but strange. The other just slapped 2 stars and said nothing at all. Not exactly confidence-inspiring, but I convinced myself it might be one of those overlooked gems, something that looked worse online than in person. The host's name was Edgar. His profile picture was this dim, off-angle selfie, balding, pale-eyed, grin pulled tight like a smoker trying to be friendly. His bio said he was a retired woodworker who valued solitude and promised guests would hardly know he was around. That line stuck with me, but at the time I brushed it off. When I showed Rachel, she wrinkled her nose at first. But the porch, the tall evergreens weighed down with snow, that won her over. She leaned into that cottagecore aesthetic. Seeing her light up like that made me believe I'd made the right call. We left Boston on the morning of December 21st, beating the traffic. The drive stretched out quiet, the kind of quiet where you keep turning the radio up then down again because neither feels right. Whitlow Pines didn't even register on Google Maps. Edgar had to email me raw GPS coordinates, which I punched into the car's system. The closer we got, the more the road narrowed. Pavement giving way to gravel, then to rutted dirt. Snow clung to the ground in uneven patches, like the forest hadn't fully made up its mind about winter. The trees pressed in close, branches nodding overhead so that light only came through in thin, cold shards. It was beautiful, sure, but the silence was thick enough that my ears buzzed. We rolled up just after 3. The house loomed bigger than I'd expected, but not in a comforting way. It leaned slightly. Weathered wood gone gray with age. Tall windows that looked too narrow, too watchful. The roof pitched steep and the stone chimney seemed unused, like it had given up years ago. The driveway stretched behind us into nothing. No neighbors, no lamps, just trees swallowing the road. Edgar was already waiting on the porch. He was smaller than I imagined, maybe 5'5", shoulders bent in on themselves, bundled in an old flannel coat. His face was drawn tight, skin pale from too many winters alone. He didn't smile, only nodded as we climbed out of the car. "You're Rachel and Tyler?" His voice rasped like sandpaper dragged over wood. "Yeah, that's us," I said, putting on a friendly tone. "Thanks for having us." He fished a brass key out of his pocket, pressed it into my palm, and gestured toward the door. "I've got a workshop out back. You won't even know I'm here. I'm good at keeping out of the way." The phrasing made my shoulders twitch, but I forced a smile. "We appreciate it." Inside, the air smelled like pine layered over dust. The first floor was open, hardwood floors that complained with every step. A fireplace that hadn't seen flames in ages. A kitchen stuck somewhere in the 80s. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms weighted with mismatched quilts, and above that, an empty loft where cold air seemed to pool. Rachel spun in a slow circle, her boots clicking against the creaky boards. "This is perfect," she said, grinning, her breath fogging faintly in the chilly air. And just like that, she'd fallen for it. Rachel wandered around the house with her phone out, snapping photos of everything. The narrow staircase, the crooked banister, the antique coat rack leaning against the wall. She even stopped to take a picture of the old clawfoot tub in the upstairs bathroom. For a second, it felt kind of charming, like she was seeing the beauty in all the flaws I'd overlooked. Then she paused. Her smile faded. "Tyler, look." I followed her gaze and realized what she meant. None of the windows had curtains. Not a single one. Every room had a bare pane of glass staring out into the trees. Curtain rods were still mounted above them, the little brackets empty like they'd once held drapes. But now nothing. Just glass. Just the forest staring back. Even the bathroom window above the tub was naked, a wide, clear view to anyone or anything outside. Rachel wrinkled her nose. "That's kinda creepy, don't you think?" "Yeah, it's weird," I admitted, trying to keep my voice casual but feeling my skin crawl. "It's like this place was designed to be watched." I pulled out my phone and messaged Edgar through the app. "Hey, quick question. Any reason there aren't curtains on the windows?" He responded within minutes, "Don't worry. No one out here but squirrels. Besides, the trees block most of the light." I stared at the reply, unsettled. His reassurance didn't help at all. It made things worse. I didn't tell Rachel how uneasy it made me feel. It was her birthday trip and I wasn't about to kill the mood. "Come on," I said, forcing a grin. "Let's open the wine, light the fireplace, pretend we're in some cheesy Hallmark movie." She smiled at that, so we did. We spent the evening drinking, watching old Christmas movies, playing cards on the rug. For a while it was warm, cozy even, like the house might not be so bad after all. But every time I caught sight of those dark windows, my eyes searched for a shape, a silhouette, something that didn't belong. Around 2 a.m., I finally drifted off with Rachel curled against me. The house was too still, the kind of stillness that keeps your brain alert long after your body wants sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, fighting that prickling sense of being observed. Eventually, I must have passed out. The buzzing woke me. My phone vibrating on the nightstand. Blinking at the screen, I saw dozens of Airbnb notifications. My heart skipped. Spam? A glitch? But the top message froze me in place. "Urgent. Please gather your belongings and leave the property immediately. Do not alert the host. Leave as quietly as possible. We will explain once you are safe." My blood went cold. I sat up, phone shaking in my hand. "Rachel," I whispered, nudging her shoulder. "Rob, baby, wake up. We need to go," she groaned, eyes half shut. "What? Why?" "Something's wrong. Airbnb just told us to leave. Now, and not to tell the host." Her expression shifted instantly. She froze, her gaze locked on something behind me. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then she screamed, a raw animal sound that jolted me upright. "There's someone in the window," she cried, pointing. I spun around, and there he was. Edgar. His face pressed against the glass, pale and stretched in the dark, his hands cupped around his eyes. He was grinning. Watching us, adrenaline hit me like a lightning strike. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and slammed my fist against the glass. "Get the hell out of here. I'm calling the cops." He didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stared, his eyes wide and unblinking, his breath fogging up the window pane. "Pack!" I barked at Rachel. My voice sounded foreign, too loud, too sharp. She was already shoving clothes into our bags with trembling hands. I snatched up my phone, wallet, keys, anything within reach. 2 minutes. That's all it took before we were dressed, packed, and bolting for the door. On the way out, I yanked a kitchen drawer open and grabbed the biggest knife I saw. My hand shook around the handle as we stumbled into the freezing night. The silence out there was heavy, unnatural, pressing in from all sides. We sprinted down the gravel to the car, breath clouding the air. Tossed our bags in the back seat, fumbling with the locks. That's when I heard it, a thud behind me. Then, smack. A hand against the driver's side window. I spun. Edgar's face was inches from mine, his palm flat against the glass. His eyes bore into me, wide and frantic, his smile twisted. I screamed, jammed the car into gear, and slammed my foot down. Gravel spat behind us as we shot down the pitch-black road. My heart hammered so violently it felt like it might split my ribs. We didn't stop until we hit the highway 20 minutes later. Headlights of passing trucks finally breaking the darkness. Rachel sat shaking beside me, gripping her knees to her chest. I was running purely on adrenaline, hands welded to the wheel. She filed the complaint on her phone before we even crossed into Massachusetts. Airbnb's response was cold. clinical. We apologize for the inconvenience. The host's account has been permanently suspended due to multiple serious violations of policy. That was it. No details, no explanation. Just a corporate shrug. They hinted that several guests had reported incidents over the past year, and that our stay had coincided with the exact moment they'd finally decided to act. I still don't know what they found, but I think about that house sometimes. The naked windows, the way he watched us, and I wonder how many people before us had woken up to find Edgar staring through the glass. How many never got the chance to leave? I never thought something like this would happen to me. Whenever people swap stories about haunted cabins or creepy Airbnbs, I usually roll my eyes and chalk it up to exaggeration. But this was different. It was real. Every second of it. My name's Ethan Wells. Back in February 2020, just a few weeks before the whole world shut down, my girlfriend and I decided to escape to the mountains for a long weekend. Both of us had been drowning in work and city stress, and we desperately needed the kind of break that felt like hitting a reset button. Hannah found a cabin in rural Vermont, advertised as an authentic 1800s retreat tucked away in the woods. At the time, it sounded like the answer to everything. Private, quiet, rustic. Exactly what we both craved. I'd been with Hannah for 3 years. We'd already talked about marriage, kids, all the future stuff that feels more real when you've been together that long. She was the adventurous one, always wanting to hike new trails, stop at weird roadside attractions, or take detours just to see where a road led. Me, I liked things planned, controlled. I felt safer knowing what came next. This trip was our compromise. She got her wilderness escape, and I got Wi-Fi and a hot tub. We overpacked, of course, snacks, blankets, way too many clothes for just 3 days, and loaded up my Jeep. The drive itself felt like part of the getaway. Wide open fields stretched out beneath pale skies. Frozen streams glinted under the sun, and the mountains loomed like dark giants. Even the air smelled different, clean, sharp, untouched by exhaust or concrete. Hannah leaned out the window at one point, laughing as the cold air whipped her hair everywhere. "Ethan, you have to admit this is better than sitting in our shoebox apartment all weekend." Yeah, I said, trying to keep the Jeep steady on the icy road. "If we don't slide off the mountain first," she teased. I smirked, but she just grabbed my phone and queued up one of our old road trip playlists, singing along badly until I joined in. For a while, everything felt normal, safe. We pulled up just before sunset. The cabin was bigger than the pictures suggested. 2 stories, steep roof, a wide wraparound porch, surrounded by towering trees that stood like silent guards. A neat woodpile sat by the door, and smoke drifted from the chimney. The owner had started a fire for us. Inside, it was exactly what you'd imagine. Creaky wooden floors, mismatched vintage furniture, a faint smell of ash lingering from the fireplace. Taxidermy deer heads on the walls that made Hannah wrinkle her nose. It wasn't modern, but it had personality. "Babe, this is perfect," she said, spinning slowly in the living room, her socks sliding on the worn planks. I set our bags down and let my eyes wander. Everything seemed fine. Quieter than I was used to, maybe. But that was the whole point. That first night was everything we'd hoped for. We opened a bottle of wine and sat in the hot tub beneath a sky alive with stars. Real stars. Not the faint pinpricks we got in the city. Later, we curled up inside, streamed a few episodes of American Dad on my laptop, and fell asleep early. Nothing strange. Not yet. I woke around 2 a.m. to a loud bang. It was so sharp my first thought was gunfire. Then I realized it had come from the front door. Hannah stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Ethan, did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice low and tight. "Yeah," I whispered back, my chest hammering. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the old heater. "Probably wind," I said, though I knew it wasn't. That noise had weight behind it, like someone had kicked the door. We stayed frozen for a few minutes, listening. Finally, I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, my hand shaking so hard the flashlight beam jittered across the walls. The front door looked fine at first. Then I leaned closer. There was a dent near the bottom. "What the hell?" I muttered. Outside, the path was soft dirt, but no new footprints. Just ours from earlier. I checked the locks, they were still bolted, and forced myself back upstairs. "Probably something fell," I lied to Hannah. "Or maybe the wood expanded in the cold." Her expression said she didn't buy it, but neither of us wanted to admit we were scared. We stayed awake another hour, whispering about nothing, before finally dozing off again. Day 2. We pushed last night out of our minds, hiked a nearby trail, grabbed greasy diner food in town, and laughed like it was just another vacation. We tried hard to pretend nothing had happened. Still, the unease clung to me like damp clothes. That dent in the door wouldn't leave my mind. What could slam against solid metal hard enough to leave a mark but not leave any trace outside? No scratches, no footprints. It didn't make sense. That night we slipped back into our routine. Hot tub, dinner, a couple of shows on my laptop. Everything seemed normal. Too normal, almost staged. But the second I lay down, it hit me. The sensation of being watched. Not from the window or a corner I could pinpoint, it was everywhere at once. It felt like the very walls were alive, pulsing, stuffed with eyes I couldn't see. I didn't dare speak. Instinct told me that if I admitted it out loud, if I gave it shape, something worse would happen. So I stayed rigid, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my ears. The house was quiet except for the occasional groan of wood settling, but that oppressive presence only grew heavier, pressing against my chest like a weight. Beside me, Hannah tossed and turned. Then in a thin whisper, "Do you feel weird?" "Just tired," I lied, swallowing hard. I didn't move, didn't get up to use the bathroom, barely even blinked. When morning finally came, the heaviness didn't leave with the darkness. It lingered. Every shadow seemed wrong, stretched too far. Every creak made me jump. Even the wind outside sounded purposeful. We left for a drive just to breathe air that wasn't inside those walls. Coming back felt like walking willingly into a trap. By 10 that night, the air in the cabin had shifted again. Heavier, charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, but worse, like if we made one wrong move, something would pounce. Around midnight, as Hannah slept, I felt it. The first touch, a light icy graze against my foot, then another across my shoulder, then unmistakably fingers sliding through my hair. My whole body broke into goosebumps. That's when I heard it. Breathing, slow, steady, right beside the bed. My pulse thundered so hard I thought it would wake Hannah. I turned slightly toward her, and that's when the real horror sank in. Hannah is the lightest sleeper I've ever known. If I even shift the blanket, she stirs. But tonight she didn't move. She was gone, out cold. I shook her gently at first, then harder. Whispered her name right in her ear. Nothing. It was like she'd been drugged. Meanwhile, the noises started downstairs. Furniture scraping, chairs dragging across wood, a rhythm to it like people moving around a table preparing for a dinner party. Then came the footsteps. Dozens of them. Some heavy, some light, pounding up the staircase. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but the screen mocked me. No signal. Of course, by 2:30 a.m., I made the decision to leave, but the stairs were narrow and steep. If I tried to carry Hannah, I risked dropping her. So I sat there instead, paralyzed, forcing myself to endure every phantom touch that returned again and again, brushing my skin, tugging lightly at my clothes, stroking my hair like I was prey. Finally, sunlight bled through the window, and just like that, everything stopped. The air lifted. The heaviness evaporated. I shook Hannah hard this time, almost frantic. She gasped awake instantly, blinking in confusion. "Ethan, why are you dressed?" "What's going on?" "Pack your stuff, now." Something in my tone must have told her not to argue. She didn't ask another question. We threw everything into the Jeep. No breakfast, no coffee, not even a glance behind us, and peeled out of there. Only once we'd driven 20 miles away did either of us speak. Hannah's voice was quiet, shaking. She admitted she'd felt the same dread the first 2 nights, that suffocating pressure. But the third night, she remembered nothing. Just blinking, and suddenly it was morning. No dreams, no tossing, just blackness. I don't know what was in that house. I don't want to know. All I know is it didn't want us there. And whatever it wasn't human. When the rental site asked for a review, I gave it 5 stars. Why? Because hosts can review guests too. And the last thing I wanted was to get blacklisted from every rental in the region. So I typed out something meaningless like, "Lovely rustic cabin, very peaceful." But I'll never forget. The dent in the door, the phantom hands, that suffocating awareness that we were never ever alone. Out there in the woods, sometimes the forest doesn't feel empty, because it isn't. I never thought a simple weekend trip could leave scars that still follow me. Whenever I share this story, most people don't take me seriously. They smirk, tell me I've watched too many horror movies, or just brush it off as an overactive imagination. But every second of what happened during those 3 nights in that Airbnb cabin was real. It happened to me. And it changed me forever. My name is Maya Parker, and before that trip I thought I had everything more or less figured out. I worked as a project coordinator in Boston, juggling deadlines and endless Zoom calls. At home I lived in a modest but cozy apartment with my boyfriend, Ethan Blake. We'd been together almost 3 years. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs. Lately, though, it felt like we were just running on fumes. There weren't dramatic fights about cheating or money. It was worse than that. It was silence. Days passed where the only things we said to each other were reminders about bills or questions like, "Did you pick up milk?" Ethan worked nights as a nurse, dragging himself through brutal 12-hour shifts, while I spent my days drowning in conference rooms and spreadsheets. When we did see each other, we were too exhausted to talk, too drained to even try. I could feel something breaking, quietly and steadily. One night, we sat across from each other in our cramped little kitchen, eating lo mein out of cardboard boxes. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He looked like a ghost of himself, hair unkempt, shadows under his eyes. I realized if we didn't do something soon, whatever we had left might not survive. "We need a break," I said, setting down my chopsticks. His eyes flicked up, tired and guarded. "A break?" "Not from each other," I said quickly, leaning forward. "From everything else. Work, stress, the grind. Just a few days. Somewhere quiet. No phones, no emails. Just us." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "And where exactly do you think we're going? It's almost Christmas and I've got a pile of extra shifts lined up. It doesn't have to be far." I pulled out my phone, the listing already open. I'd been looking at it all week, like a secret wish. "Here, look." He took the phone and scrolled through the pictures. A small wooden cabin in rural New Hampshire, surrounded by dense forest, a frozen lake glittering just beyond the tree line. The ad promised peace, privacy, and a stone fireplace. "It looks remote," he said. "That's the point." I smiled, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. 3 nights. Friday to Monday, just us. "We need this, Ethan." He studied the screen for a long moment and then finally nodded. "Okay, let's do it." And for the first time in months, I saw him smile without forcing it. Friday came faster than I expected. We packed our bags, stuffed the car with snacks, extra blankets, and too many sweaters. By noon, we were on the road, music low and conversation minimal. The drive stretched to 3.5 hours, winding deeper into narrow back roads. The further we went, the more the world seemed to fall away, swallowed by bare trees and winter silence. By the time the GPS cheerfully announced, "You have arrived at your destination," the sun was already dipping, casting long skeletal shadows across the woods. For a terrifying second, I thought we were lost. The driveway was nothing but a gravel path buried between dark pines. Then just beyond a bend, the cabin appeared. It looked like something from a snow globe postcard. Small, rustic, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. "Wow," I whispered as we pulled up. The host had left the lights on for us, warm and golden against the gray forest. Inside, the place looked exactly like the photos. Wood-paneled walls, wide windows, a massive stone fireplace. A tiny Christmas tree sat in the corner, already decorated, its colored bulbs twinkling faintly. "This is perfect," I said, dropping my bag by the couch. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Yeah, not bad." We unpacked, threw together a simple dinner, and later curled up by the fire with glasses of wine. For the first time in months, I let myself believe maybe we were okay, that maybe this little getaway could fix us. But that was before everything changed. Sometime around midnight, I woke to use the bathroom. The cabin was still except for the occasional pop from the fireplace. As I padded past the living room, something caught my eye, the front door. It was unlocked. I froze, staring. I knew for a fact we'd locked it before bed. Ethan had even made a joke as he checked it. City habits die hard. My stomach clenched. Quietly, I clicked the deadbolt back into place, trying not to wake him. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Maybe I hadn't noticed. Maybe he'd forgotten. But deep down, unease settled in my chest. The next day was normal, peaceful even. We hiked through the woods, our boots crunching through snow. We cooked together, played cards, laughed over stupid inside jokes that hadn't surfaced in months. For a few fleeting hours it felt like the old days. But when night fell, the silence of the cabin grew heavier, pressing against my skin. Too still, too watchful. We went to bed around 11:30. Sometime after 2 in the morning, a sound jolted me awake. Knock, knock, knock. It was slow, deliberate, coming from the wall right beside the bed. I held my breath, every muscle in my body locked. I told myself I was dreaming, that I imagined it, but then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling as I shook his shoulder. "Wake up," he groaned, half asleep. "What?" Before I could answer, the knocking came again. This time louder, closer, impossible to ignore. His eyes snapped open, wide and alert. "What the hell?" he whispered. We both sat up, staring dumbly at the wall like children afraid of the dark. Ethan fumbled for his phone, thumb trembling as he flicked on the flashlight. The beam washed over the wood-paneled wall. Nothing. Just knots and grain. Then, as if taunting us, the knocking started again. This time it came from the opposite side of the room. My veins went cold like ice spreading under my skin. "Get dressed," Ethan whispered sharply. His voice was tight, controlled, but his hands shook as he pulled on his jacket. We scrambled into our coats, trying not to breathe too loud. The cabin floor creaked under our steps as we crept down the hallway toward the front door. My vision tunneled, every shadow stretching too far. Then, something flickered at the edge of my sight. A quick, jerky movement near the window. I snapped my head toward it so fast my neck twinged, but there was nothing there. Just glass reflecting our pale, frightened faces. When we reached the living room, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. The front door wasn't just unlocked. It was wide open, yawning into the night. The fire had nearly burned itself out, and icy air rushed inside, raising goosebumps on my arms. Ethan lunged forward, slamming the door shut. He locked it with fumbling hands, his breath coming fast. "Maya," he whispered hoarsely. "Someone was in here. That's when we saw it, a wet footprint on the wooden floor. Bare, human, we didn't sleep." Not a minute. Instead, we sat on the couch by the dim glow of the fireplace, every light in the cabin blazing. The mugs of coffee in our hands rattled against the saucers because neither of us could stop shaking. Every gust of wind outside, every pop of the wood made us jump. "Should we leave?" I whispered sometime around 4 a.m. My voice sounded small, like it didn't belong to me. Ethan shook his head, eyes fixed on the door. "It's freezing. The roads are black ice and we're in the middle of nowhere. We'll leave when the sun's up." Morning finally came. The gray light creeping through the windows was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We searched every corner of the cabin, every lock, every window. Nothing. No scratches, no forced entry. Outside, the snow was untouched except for our own boot tracks. "Maybe it was the wind," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to me. He said it like he was trying to build a wall of logic against the truth. I didn't argue, but I didn't believe it either. That night, the last night, was the worst. It was just after 1:30 when I felt myself drifting off, eyelids heavy, when I heard it. Not knocking this time, whispering, soft, faint, coming from the dark corner of the room. "Ethan," I hissed, shaking him awake. He groaned. "What now?" "Listen." We both held our breath. The whispering grew clearer, closer, like someone crouched right beside the bed, murmuring just under their breath. Then slowly words formed. "Get out." I've never moved so fast in my life. My body acted before my mind caught up. I yanked on my coat, grabbed my phone with trembling hands, didn't even bother with shoes. Ethan was right behind me. We bolted, out the door, down the gravel path, snow biting at our bare feet. We didn't look back. Not until we were in the car, tires spinning on the icy driveway. And then, stupidly, against every instinct screaming not to, I glanced at the cabin. A figure stood in the upstairs window. Tall. Still. Watching us. We didn't stop driving until we found a gas station an hour away. Fluorescent lights buzzing over the empty parking lot. My hands shook as I called the Airbnb host the next morning. My voice was raw, frantic, demanding answers. She sounded shocked, confused, swore no one else had keys. Then she said something that still makes my stomach turn. "You're not the first guest to leave early. Most don't even stay the first night." When I pressed her why, she went silent. Then she hung up. I never heard from her again. We left everything behind in that cabin. Our clothes, toiletries, even Ethan's laptop. Abandoned like offerings to whatever claimed that place. The refund didn't matter. All that mattered was getting away. But some things you can't outrun. 2 weeks later, back in our Boston apartment, I tried to convince myself life was normal again. That the whispers, the knocking, the figure in the window, they were just nightmares I'd dragged home with me. Ethan refused to talk about it. Any time I brought it up, his face shut down completely, like even acknowledging it might make it real again. Last night destroyed any hope I had of moving on. It was 3:17 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I got up for a glass of water. The city outside was dead quiet, muffled by winter. As I turned back toward the bedroom, I froze. The front door, wide open. Cold air curling across the hardwood like fingers. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stepped closer, praying Ethan had simply forgotten to lock it. But then I saw it. On the floor, gleaming faintly in the dim streetlight filtering through the window. A footprint. Bare. Wet. And then, from the darkness outside, knock. Knock. This time, it wasn't on the wall. It was on the glass of my living room window. I wasn't even supposed to have that weekend free. I work IT support at a mid-size firm in Manchester, and the past month had been hell. Crashed servers, a ransomware scare, and 2 all-nighters where I lived on Red Bull and crisps. So when my boss finally told me to take some time off to touch grass before you combust, I didn't need telling twice. I texted my girlfriend Lena, "Pack a bag. We're getting the hell out of the city." She replied in seconds with 3 heart emojis, and finally, we'd been together 2 years. Done plenty of little road trips, but not a proper getaway. Just the 2 of us, since New Year's. The timing couldn't have been better. No support tickets, no buzzing Slack messages, no family drama. Just a long weekend where the only sounds would be birds instead of ambulance sirens. I spent an hour scrolling Airbnb before I found it. A stone brick cottage just outside the Lake District, tucked against a tree line, remote without being off the grid. The listing had that cozy but slightly isolated vibe Lena loves. The host's name was Howard. His profile picture showed a man in his 60s, smile lines carved deep into his face, eyes that looked both tired and kind. 40+ 5-star reviews. Words like polite and professional and unobtrusive repeated again and again, but one detail caught our attention. In the listing's description, bolded, "Top floor is off limits, locked at all times. Guests may use only the lower 2 floors." Creepy, isn't it? Lena said when I showed her, squinting at Howard's photo. Like, why make it such a point? Probably just junk storage, I said, though it did prickle at me. Still, I'll bring my pocket knife. She rolled her eyes, smiling. Yeah, that'll totally stop the ghost of Howard's attic. We booked it. Friday morning we set off. The drive took 3 hours with 2 stops, one for petrol, another for Greg's sandwiches that were, as always, terrible and addictive. The sky was shockingly clear, the air sharp and cold in a way Manchester never manages. For the first time in weeks, I felt my chest unclench. The cottage was even better than the pictures. It sat at the edge of the woods, gravel crunching under our tires as we pulled up. The porch was wide, the kind you imagine with rocking chairs, and the sun filtered through the trees, making everything smell like pine. Inside, the scent shifted, lavender mixed with old wood. The layout matched the listing perfectly, kitchen, dining, and living room on the ground floor. Upstairs, a bedroom and bathroom, and then another short staircase ending at the locked 3rd-floor door. A bolt and keyhole secured it. Out of habit, I tried the handle. Solid. "No big deal," Lena said, already wandering with her phone out, snapping photos of the antique fireplace, the lace curtains, the floral armchairs. That night, we cooked pasta, opened a cheap bottle of wine, and played cards until we were tipsy enough to laugh at everything. Later, we curled up on the sofa, half watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine reruns on Netflix when Lena suddenly hit pause. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I muted the TV. At first, nothing. Then creak, creak, creak. Faint, rhythmic, like someone pacing across old boards overhead. My stomach tightened. I stood, walked to the bottom of the staircase. "Howard," I called, my voice a little too loud. Silence. We both stared at the locked door above. Raccoons, I said, trying to make it sound casual. Or squirrels. Old house noises. Could be anything, but Lena didn't laugh. She hugged her knees tighter and muttered, "Raccoons don't wear shoes." The next morning, I texted Howard. "Hey, heard some creaking upstairs last night. Not a complaint, just checking if anyone's staying up there." His reply came fast. "Nope, just old floorboards settling. Happens all the time. Don't worry, you've got the place to yourselves. Enjoy your stay." I showed Lena. She frowned but didn't argue. We tried to shrug it off. That afternoon we went hiking. Lena took dozens of photos. Tree bark close-ups, wildflowers, the stream glinting through rocks. By the time we returned, the sun was low. We showered, cooked again, then collapsed on the sofa. We put on a horror movie but gave up halfway. It dragged too much. Lena tossed the remote to me. "Find something dumb," she said, curling against my shoulder. I started flipping channels. Static, shopping networks, reruns no one asked for. And then we landed on something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a show. It wasn't a film. The screen flickered into night vision footage. Grainy, green, unmistakably real. A bedroom, empty at first, but the layout was familiar. Too familiar. Same bed frame. Same crooked lampshade. Same curtains we'd shut just hours earlier. "Our room," I whispered. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe some weird channel. A security feed from a different place with the same furniture. But then Lena stepped closer to the TV, lifted her hand and waved. 2 seconds later, the figure on the screen raised her hand in the exact same way. Her tank top, her gold bracelet glinting faintly. Every detail was hers. Lena screamed and dropped the remote like it burned her. We scrambled, flipping channels. One showed the living room, the sofa we were sitting on, the angle from high in a corner. Another, bathroom sink, toothbrushes lined in a glass. Another still outside. Our car in the driveway, red Vauxhall caught in sickly night vision glow. There were cameras everywhere. Holy fuck, we're being watched. My voice came out too loud, panicked. I pulled out my phone, started recording the TV, every channel, every angle. "Call the cops. Now, Lena, call them." Her hands shook so hard she couldn't even pick her phone up. "No police," she said. Her voice was thin, trembling. "What? Are you insane? We need—" She cut me off, eyes wet. "I don't want them seeing us." The shower, the bed, all of it. Her voice cracked, and that was when it hit me. She wasn't just scared of who was watching. She was terrified of what already existed on tape. I swallowed it down, rage boiling under my ribs. "Fine, but we're leaving. Now." We tore through the cottage, stuffing clothes into bags, shoving chargers, shoes, everything we could grab. My hands shook so badly I couldn't get my duffel to zip. It was almost midnight when we dragged the bags out to the car. The gravel crunched loud, too loud, every sound making me flinch. I turned back for one last look, chest tight. That's when I saw it. A figure in the third-floor window. Just a silhouette, pale curtain pulled half aside. Watching. My whole body screamed to run inside, rip the lock open, drag whoever it was into the light. But my legs wouldn't move. I just stood there, heart slamming, until Lena tugged my arm and hissed, "Get in the car, please." We drove. Back in Manchester, Lena made me promise not to post the footage online. No Reddit, no TikTok, and no news. She didn't want strangers dissecting us, screenshotting us in moments that weren't meant for anyone else. So I went to Airbnb. I sent them the recordings, laid everything out. At first they responded like they cared. Apologies, case escalation, reassurances. Then the replies turned cold, robotic. "We're sorry for your experience. Your refund has been processed. The host has been removed." That was it. Howard's account banned. The listing gone. No police involvement, no answers, just corporate template empathy. When I pressed harder, their legal team stepped in. I got a neat, sterile email. Howard had claimed the cameras weren't recording, just live feeds for a social experiment. A prank. No injury had occurred, so the case was closed. Lena wanted it buried. But me? I couldn't let it go. Since then, I check everything. Every smoke detector, every outlet, every TV, and every hotel or rental. I can't walk into a strange room without scanning for the tiny black eye of a hidden lens. You don't forget something like that. You don't unsee your private life turned into a broadcast. And then weeks later, I gave in to morbid curiosity. Made a burner account. Searched listings. The cottage was back. Same photos. Same porch. Same goddamn trees in the background. Just a new host name, a different smiling profile picture. I reported it. Airbnb took it down. A week later, it reappeared. Again. There are people out there who do this on purpose, who rent out houses not for the money, but to watch, to invade, to take. Some get caught, most don't. And if you're telling yourself it couldn't happen to you, maybe you're right. Maybe. But remember this. If you ever hear footsteps in a place where no one else is supposed to be, don't shrug it off. Don't tell yourself it's just old wood settling, because sometimes it isn't. I never imagined a music tour could change the way I saw the world, but October of 2017 did exactly that. We were halfway through a 2-week run across Europe, my bandmates and I, and up until then it had been everything we had ever wanted. We were playing to sweaty, crowded rooms where people screamed our lyrics louder than we could sing them. By day we wandered through new cities, tried strange food, laughed at road signs we couldn't read, and by night we lived the kind of adventure you always tell yourself you'll never forget. And I haven't, but not for the reasons I once thought. Some memories don't just stick. They stay with you like a shadow you can't shake. There were 4 of us. Me, Jake on drums, Ryan on lead guitar, and Liam on bass. Our whole world fit into a beat-up silver Honda Jazz that had racked up more miles than it had any right to. The car sagged with the weight of amps and cases, and we had to wedge things in so tightly that opening the trunk became a gamble every morning. Hours on the road left our bodies stiff, knees aching and legs tingling from lack of circulation, but we didn't complain. Not once. We were too caught up in the dream. Sleep was something we got wherever we could, sometimes in dingy hostels, sometimes balled up in the car. But every so often, a venue owner would take pity on us and offer a place to crash. After 9 hours of driving, nothing feels more like salvation than being handed a set of keys. That night, after a gig in a mid-sized city, I'll call it Rosenheim for the sake of privacy, the club owner casually mentioned they had an apartment we could use. When I heard the word apartment, I pictured cracked walls, cigarette-stained ceilings, maybe a pull-out couch if we were lucky. We all nodded politely, grateful regardless, but when we arrived, it stunned us into silence. The building was old but beautifully restored, tucked between 2 stone facades that looked like they had been standing since the Middle Ages. The apartment itself was on the top floor, and when we stepped inside, it felt like walking into a spread from an interior design magazine. The wooden floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Sleek furniture filled the wide-open space, and massive floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glow of the city at night. There were 2 bedrooms, each with king-sized beds that looked like clouds, a bathroom big enough to get lost in, complete with a glass shower and a jacuzzi tub, and a kitchen stocked like someone actually lived there. It felt more like a dream than a late-night crash pad. "Holy shit," Jake muttered, dragging his bag over the threshold. His voice echoed slightly against the high ceiling. "This is nicer than my entire apartment back home." "No kidding," Ryan said, already flopping onto a leather couch with a groan of satisfaction. "We should just move in. Tour's over." I laughed, but quietly. They were buzzing, full of leftover energy from the show, but my body felt heavy. The last few nights had been nothing but gigs, after-parties, endless chatter, and my mind felt wrung out. All I wanted was silence. When they started tossing around the idea of checking out some local bars, I raised my hands in surrender. "I'm sitting this one out, guys. I can't keep my eyes open. You sure?" Liam asked, zipping up his jacket. "Might be the only time we're in Rosenheim." I gave him a tired grin. "Trust me, man, the only thing I want to see tonight is the back of my eyelids." Ryan smirked halfway to the door. "Suit yourself, Grandpa." Their laughter faded down the hallway as the elevator doors swallowed them up. The bedrooms were already claimed, which left me the open-plan living area. Honestly, I didn't mind. I unrolled my air mattress on the polished floor near the kitchen and living room, right in the middle where all the doors met. Somehow it felt safer there, like I'd know immediately if someone walked in. As I set up, I noticed a small folded leaflet left on the table beside the Wi-Fi code. I picked it up and scanned it absent-mindedly. "This building has stood since 1260, a symbol of Rosenheim's resilience." I blinked at that. The apartment looked brand new. not like it had been around for centuries.
Still, I guessed extensive renovations could disguise a lot.
The thought of centuries of lives passing through this place made something in my stomach shift, but I brushed it off and set the leaflet down. With my little bed ready, I stretched out, phone in hand, scrolling mindlessly through feeds as the city lights filtered through the blinds in pale stripes across the floor. My eyelids grew heavier with every swipe until finally the glow blurred and sleep pulled me under. What dragged me back was sound, a steady, deliberate rhythm. At first I thought it was part of a dream, but then I opened my eyes. Drip, drip, drip. It was 3:30 a.m. Annoyed, I assumed one of the guys had gone for that jacuzzi bath they wouldn't shut up about and left the tap running. Later, I'd learned none of them had even set foot in the bathroom. At the time, though, I just sighed, dragged the blanket over my head, and tried to let the sound fade into the background. That's when it happened. A sudden pressure on the bottom corner of my air mattress, as if someone had planted a knee right there. The whole thing dipped sharply, the opposite side rising an inch like a trampoline when someone jumps nearby. My eyes snapped open. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it echo in my skull. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind scrambled, dreaming maybe? Sleep paralysis, but no. I could wiggle my fingers, clench my jaw. I was awake. Then it happened again. Softer this time, more deliberate, like a hand pressing down, like someone testing the weight beside me. My throat went dry. Slowly, against every instinct, I turned my head toward the foot of the bed. Nothing. But when my gaze drifted just past the dining table, no more than 2 feet away, my stomach flipped. There was a shape. Human. Standing against the far wall. The blinds let in only a thin wash of city light, just enough to etch an outline. Long, impossibly long hair, so long it nearly brushed the wooden floor. Skin pale enough to reflect that faint glow, and the face, oh God, the face there wasn't one. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a smooth blank canvas where a person's features should have been. I blinked hard once, twice, hoping, praying, but it didn't vanish. It stood there still as a mannequin. My instincts screamed at me to yell, to call the others back, to do something. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came. Fear seemed to crawl inside me and clamp its fist around my throat. So I did the only thing my brain could latch onto. I yanked the blanket over my head like a terrified kid and whispered into the suffocating dark. It's not real. It's not real. Please just let me sleep, please. I don't remember drifting off. Maybe I blacked out from sheer terror. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight poured through the windows, filling the apartment with golden warmth. For a second, the whole thing seemed ridiculous, like a bad dream that shriveled under daylight. Ryan sat at the table, laptop open, coffee in hand, casual as ever. "Morning, man," he said without looking up. I bolted upright, heart still thrashing against my ribs. "Ryan, did you come back in the middle of the night?" He glanced up, brow furrowed.
Yeah?
"Around 4, maybe." Why? I hesitated. My lips parted, but the words felt absurd. I shut my mouth again, unsure. Before I could decide, Liam shuffled out of one of the bedrooms. He looked awful, eyes sunken, face pale, hands shaking as he fumbled with the coffee pot. "You good, dude?" Ryan asked, grinning. "You look like hell." Liam didn't answer right away. He stirred his mug with a trembling spoon, then finally muttered, flat and tired, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." That froze me. I set my cup down slowly. "Try me." He met my eyes for a long moment. Then he said, "Someone climbed into bed with me last night." Ryan burst out laughing, but I didn't. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "At first I thought it was one of you assholes messing with me," Liam continued quickly, eyes darting between us like he needed us to believe him. But when I turned, there was nothing. No one, just the blanket, sinking, like something was lying next to me. He swallowed hard, his hand trembling against the mug. I felt it breathe, cold, right against my back. The room went silent. None of us said what we were thinking, but the look we shared was enough. Whatever I saw, or thought I saw, Liam had felt. We packed faster than we ever had in our lives, barely speaking, and by the time the sun had fully risen, we were already on the road, swearing to each other we'd never stay in Rosenheim again. But even now, years later, the memory hasn't faded. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see that faceless shape against the wall, And worse, when I'm lying alone at night, I swear I feel the mattress dip. I was 10 years old the summer it happened, and even now, more than a decade later, I still can't bring myself to sleep with the curtains open. Back then, life was uncomplicated. No bills, no deadlines, no real responsibilities, just bikes, video games, and the kind of summer days that stretched forever. That summer of 2014 was supposed to be like every other, but my parents had different plans. Instead of the usual beach trip, Dad wanted mountain air and family bonding. Mom wanted peace and quiet, a break from the endless hum of suburbia. And me? I just wanted Wi-Fi. We lived in Kansas City at the time, and Dad stumbled across a cabin rental on some site kind of like Airbnb, though I'd never even heard of it. "It's cheaper than a hotel and has character," he said, tapping through the photos on his laptop. The pictures showed a small wooden cabin tucked into thick woods, with the listing title calling it a rustic retreat on Pine Hollow Lane. It looked old but tidy, with a little front deck and a fire pit out back. "It's near a state park," Dad explained, sounding proud. He used to camp there as a teenager. He promised hiking trails, fishing spots, a chance to unplug. I nodded, but really, I was already planning how many DS cartridges I could squeeze into my backpack. We left early on a Friday morning in July, one of those mornings where the sun was already bright but the air was still crisp. I pressed my forehead against the car window, watching the world shift. First the suburbs, then farmland, and finally the thick, endless green of Missouri forests. The farther we drove, the fewer cars we saw. When Dad finally turned onto a gravel road, the crunch under the tires felt final, like we had truly left everything behind. "Wow. This is remote," Mom said, holding her thermos like a shield. "That's the point." Dad grinned. "No neighbors. No traffic. Just us." The road twisted deeper into the trees until we broke into a small clearing, and there it was, the cabin. Dark wood siding, steep roof, tall pines crowding around like watchmen. At first I thought it looked magical, almost like a picture from a camping magazine. But the silence hit me almost immediately. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. I hopped out when Dad parked, the air cool and pine-heavy. The smell of damp earth clung to everything. I scuffed the gravel with my sneaker, glancing at the details. A porch with 2 rocking chairs, a rusty lantern dangling crookedly beside the door, a fire pit out back surrounded by stumps for seats. Beyond that, nothing but thick trees pressing against the edge of the clearing. "Cool, right?" Dad asked, already pulling bags from the trunk. "Yeah," I said automatically, though the truth was the silence felt too heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. Inside, the cabin was simple: plaid couch, small kitchen with outdated appliances, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. The air smelled faintly of cedar, undercut with something older, musty like damp wood left too long in the dark. On the coffee table sat a guest book, thick with handwritten notes. "Lovely weekend. We'll be back. Perfect getaway. 5 stars." Mom flipped through it while Dad inspected the kitchen. I drifted to the back window and stared out. The trees pressed so close it felt suffocating, as though the forest itself was inching forward. That first night seemed normal enough. We grilled hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, played cards. Dad told us stories about camping as a kid, like the time raccoons raided his cooler and stole every last pancake. I laughed, but each time the woods went silent, a weight settled in my chest, a crawling awareness that we weren't really alone. When night came, it was dark, not suburban dark with a few street lamps, but a suffocating black that swallowed the windows whole. I brushed my teeth in the small bathroom, staring at my own face in the cracked mirror, trying not to think about how far we were from anyone. I crawled into bed, the drone of crickets and frogs seeping through the walls. My parents' voices were a soft murmur down the hall. Eventually I drifted off. Somewhere in the night I woke up. My bladder ached. I checked Dad's old wristwatch on the nightstand, 2:04 a.m. The cabin was hushed except for the faint hum of the fridge. I slipped out of bed, careful on the groaning floorboards. The bathroom was down the hall, just past a narrow window overlooking the front porch. As I shuffled by, something caught my eye. I froze. At first I thought it was just the reflection of a tree, some trick of shadows. But no, there was a man, standing motionless in the clearing just beyond the porch. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pacing or waving or trying to get closer. He was just standing there. My breath caught sharp in my throat. The man wore a mask. A plain white mask, smooth as porcelain, with two empty black holes where the eyes should have been. No features. No expression. Just blank. But his head was tilted ever so slightly, like he was studying me. Curious. Every hair on my body prickled. My hand clamped down on the wall for balance, but I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was as if my body forgot how to breathe. We just stared. Or rather, I stared. I don't know if he could actually see me in the dark hallway, but something deep in my gut told me he could. He knew I was there. Then slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head the other way. Like he was nodding to me. Like he was acknowledging me. Something in me snapped. My legs finally listened, and I bolted, tearing down the hallway, bursting into my parents' room. I shook my dad hard, my voice breaking. Dad, there's someone outside. Dad sat up, disoriented, his eyes half closed. What are you talking about? A man, I gasped, nearly sobbing. A man wearing a mask. He's out there. Mom blinked awake, her face strained. What do you mean, a mask? Dad didn't argue. He swung his legs out of bed, grabbed the heavy flashlight from his bag, and stormed toward the front of the cabin. Mom pulled me against her chest, her hand trembling as she smoothed my hair. It's okay, honey. You probably just dreamed it, she whispered, though her voice wavered. When Dad yanked the curtain aside, the clearing was empty. Nothing but shadows shifting between the trees. He stepped outside, sweeping the beam of the flashlight over the clearing across the porch into the woods. Nothing. No one's out here, he said at last. But his tone wasn't reassuring. His voice was thin, uncertain. I tried to insist, my words tripping over each other, but they didn't want to hear it. A nightmare, they said. Imagination. Still, I curled between them in their bed that night, shaking so hard the mattress quivered beneath us. Sleep barely came. The next morning, Dad went out to prove it was nothing. I hovered on the porch, biting my nails as he scanned the clearing. He walked in circles, his boots crunching against dirt and gravel, until suddenly he stopped. His shoulders stiffened. There were footprints. Bare footprints, human, stamped deep into the soil. When he came back, his face was pale, tight around the mouth. He didn't tell me I imagined anything after that. We spent the entire day driving around, eating lunch in town, trying to fill the hours with anything but the cabin. My parents spoke in low tones when they thought I wasn't listening, trading glances that told me more than words could. They were scared too. That night, every door and window was locked. Dad set the flashlight on the nightstand like a weapon. I don't know why I woke up again. Something pulled me out of sleep, maybe instinct, but when I opened my eyes, it was around 2 a.m. and I wasn't alone. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was faint but sharp, deliberate. Knuckles or fingernails rapping against glass. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I crept toward the living room, my pulse thundering. My parents were already there, frozen in place. Mom's hand clutched Dad's arm so hard her knuckles were white. The tapping came from the big front window. Dad's voice was barely a breath. Stay behind me. He reached for the curtain with a trembling hand. My lungs locked as he pulled it aside, and there he was, the masked man, standing inches from the glass, so close his breath should have fogged it. His head hung low at first, but as the curtain shifted, he lifted it. Slowly, too slowly, until those black voids where eyes should be locked directly onto us. Nothing. No sound, no movement. Just that blank, horrible mask staring through us. Dad swore under his breath and yanked the curtain shut. His voice was hard, urgent. Shoes now. Mom didn't argue. She snatched her purse, my DS still on the coffee table, and shoved it into her bag before pulling me toward the door. I dared one last glance at the window. The curtain moved just slightly, like fingers brushing it from the other side. He was still there, watching. We ran. The gravel crunched deafeningly under our feet, echoing through the trees. I kept expecting him to burst out of the shadows to chase us, but he never did. We slammed the car doors. Dad fumbled the keys. Then the engine roared to life. As we pulled away, I turned back. The porch was empty, but the forest felt alive, heavy with eyes. We didn't stop until we reached a motel an hour away. None of us slept. None of us even spoke much. We never went back to that cabin. Dad thought about calling the sheriff, but Mom shook her head. What are we supposed to say? That some guy in a mask just stood outside our window? Her voice was a whisper. They'll think we're crazy. Maybe she was right. Or maybe that's exactly what he wanted. I'm 21 now, living in a small apartment in the city, miles away from any woods. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when I catch my reflection in a darkened window, that old weight presses down on my chest. The thought claws its way back into my head. What if he's still out there? What if he remembers me? And sometimes, when the world is too still, I swear I hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. I've always believed nature could mend almost anything. The sharp sweetness of pine, the hush of wind weaving through tall trees, the kind of silence you just don't get in a city. That was always my cure, my reset button. And after the year I'd had, I needed not just a reset but an entire forest to scrape off the stress clinging to me like tar. By late September 2023, I finally hit the wall at work. The kind of wall where your brain feels heavy, like wet concrete, and every email smacks you like a slap across the face. I was done. Done with 12-hour days staring at a screen. Done with the endless drizzle that coated Tacoma in gray, like living under a soggy blanket. Jason, my husband, had been repeating the same thing for weeks. You need a break, Mia. We both do. That Friday night, after yet another soul-sucking Zoom call, I gave in. I opened the Airbnb app, typed in the words that felt like medicine. Lakefront cabin. That's how I found it. A rustic one-story on Clearwater Lake, tucked into the Cascades about 2 hours east. The photos hooked me instantly. Wooden walls, green metal roof, wrap-around deck, and a narrow path that led straight to a private dock stretching into glassy black water. Behind it, a wall of fir and cedar stood tall like sentinels. The listing promised 2 bedrooms, a working fireplace, no neighbors for half a mile, and even a kayak for guests. Jason leaned over my shoulder, scanned the description, and grinned. Book it before someone else does. So I did. 1 week in late October, right when the leaves would be fire and gold. I thought I was buying peace. Instead, I bought the worst week of my life. We left the city early Sunday morning, coffee steaming in our travel mugs, a cooler full of groceries packed in the back of Jason's SUV. The farther we drove, the thinner the highway grew, 4 lanes shrinking to 2, then to a winding strip carved through dripping moss and cliffs. Cell service blinked out somewhere past a wooden sign. Welcome to Clearwater County. By the time we hit the dirt road that led to the cabin, the sky was already bruised with dusk. The GPS pin hovered like a question mark as the SUV jolted over potholes, branches scraping against the doors. Then suddenly the trees parted and there it was, the cabin. Exactly like the pictures, maybe even better. Warm orange light spilled from the front window where the host had left a lamp glowing. Jason killed the engine and whispered, "God, this is wow." I stepped out, boots sinking into damp soil, and just stood there breathing. The air smelled like rain mixed with cedar sap, sharp and almost sweet. The lake shimmered beyond the trees, reflecting the pale ribbon of a rising moon. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders drop, the knot inside me loosening. Inside, the cabin was cozy in a lived-in way. A stone fireplace, shelves stacked with dog-eared paperbacks, 2 small bedrooms, a bathroom faintly scented of bleach, and a wide living area with a picture window staring out at the water. On the counter sat a guest book filled with notes from couples and hikers. Peaceful, perfect escape. We unpacked, cracked open a bottle of wine, and toasted to 7 days of no Slack pings. No deadlines, no neighbors banging through thin walls. That first night, I slept deeper than I had in months. Monday and Tuesday unfolded like a dream. We hiked Clearwater Ridge, roasted marshmallows on the deck, even took the kayak out, drifting across water so still it looked like obsidian. Nights were for firelight, laughter, and silence thick enough to hear our own breathing. Jason kept saying, "Best idea you've ever had." By Wednesday, I felt like myself again, lighter, alive, no longer haunted by unread emails. But Thursday night changed everything. We were in the living room. Around 9:45 p.m., Jason thumbing through a paperback while I half-watched an old comedy on my laptop. Rain tapped gently on the roof. Smoke from the fireplace perfumed the room. I was drifting toward sleep when 3 knocks broke the air, sharp, polite, and completely out of place. Jason froze. "Were you expecting someone?" I laughed softly. "Out here. No way. He set the book down and I muted the laptop, my chest tightening. The knocks came again. 3 quick raps, like a delivery driver who didn't want to wait. But there'd been no engine, no crunch of gravel. Just rain and trees whispering in the dark. Jason grabbed the flashlight, flicked on the porch light and cracked the door. A man stood there, dripping rain, holding a mountain bike. Mud streaked his calves, spattered across his windbreaker. A small headlamp sat crooked on his helmet, casting a faint, wobbly glow. He looked maybe in his late 20s, cheeks flushed pink from the cold, breath puffing white into the night. "Sorry to bother you folks," and he said, voice soft but with a slight tremor. "Name's Ryan. I came up to ride Clearwater Ridge, but I didn't plan for how dark it gets out here. My phone died and I don't feel great about riding back on that trail in the rain. Any chance I could? I don't know. Crash on your porch until morning?" Jason hesitated, and so did I. The Airbnb rules had a bright red line about no unregistered guests, but the guy seemed harmless, just a tired cyclist who'd misjudged the weather. Jason glanced at me and I could read the debate flicker across his face. Finally, he stepped back. "Come in for a bit," he said. "At least you'll warm up." Ryan's relief was almost visible. He smiled like we'd saved his life. We set him up on the couch with a quilt, handed him a plate of leftover chili. Polite, almost painfully so, he thanked us 3 times. He told us he'd been biking solo from Portland, hopping from trail to trail. No weird questions, no odd energy, just a guy who seemed genuinely grateful for dry socks and warmth. By midnight, we all turned in. Jason and I to the back bedroom, Ryan curled up on the couch. I lay awake for a while, listening to rain tap against the roof, thinking about the strangeness of hosting a stranger. But he seemed safe, harmless. Morning came, and he was gone, already packing his bike. On the counter, a $20 bill for electricity and hot water. He thanked us again and pedaled off down the gravel road. Jason watched him disappear into the trees. "Well, fun," he said. "That was weird." By noon, we'd forgotten him. Our last night Sunday started perfectly. We grilled steaks on the deck, sipped whiskey by the fire, talked about making this an annual escape. Rain returned after dark, soft and steady, drumming the roof like fingers. Around 3 a.m., a sharp, brittle sound woke me, glass striking tile. My heart thudded. Jason stirred beside me, and "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," I whispered. We got up, Jason grabbed the flashlight, and we crept into the kitchen. The beam cut through shadows, landing on a broken glass on the floor. The small window above the sink was open, rain dripping in. Cold air carried the smell of wet earth. Jason frowned. "I thought we latched this," I said, voice thin even to me. He shut the window, locked it, swept up the shards. We listened for a long minute. Only the rain and the trees answered. Finally, we went back to bed. Morning came gray and heavy. I walked into the kitchen to start coffee and froze. "Mia!" Jason called, but I couldn't answer. Muddy footprints, thin, narrow, heel-to-toe, crossed the floor from the window to the hallway toward our bedroom and back again. 2 of Jason's shirts were gone, my Kindle, and the envelope of cash we'd brought for groceries. The cabin had a single security camera over the sliding door. Jason pulled the memory card, loaded the footage. At 3:02 a.m., a figure appeared outside the kitchen window. Gloved hands eased it open. He slid inside, crouched on the counter, then dropped silently to the floor. When the glass broke, he flinched but didn't run. Instead, he crept down the hallway toward our bedroom. On the screen, we watched ourselves. Jason with the flashlight, me behind him. The intruder pressed flat against the pantry door, shoulders nearly brushing Jason's if he had stepped back. After we returned to bed, he methodically gathered clothes, electronics, and cash. Then he slipped out the same way, jogging toward the trees. For a split second, his headlamp flicked on, and that's when I saw his face. Ryan. We packed in 15 minutes, didn't even glance at the guest book. The sheriff's office in Mill Creek copied the video. Ryan matched the description of a suspect in 2 other cabin break-ins. Cyclists had reported meeting a friendly stranger on the trail, then later discovering missing belongings. But what haunts me most are the footprints. They stopped at our bedroom door, then turned around. He came that close enough to hear us breathe. The deputy said surrounding counties would be alerted, but transients were notoriously hard to track. Jason and I drove home in silence. That was 8 months ago. They never found him. Sometimes I dream about that pantry door, how close he was and how thin the line is between kindness and danger. I thought leaving would fix something inside me, or at least give me and Ava a chance to breathe. After the year we'd had, I was willing to try anything. A change of scenery, even for a few days, felt like survival. Just 6 months earlier, life was still whole. Daniel kissed me goodbye on a sharp, cold December morning, his breath steaming in the air as he promised he'd be home by summer. He'd taken a short-term contract in Cape Town, South Africa. 3 months of solid pay, perfectly timed before Ava started second grade. We made it work. Every night we FaceTimed, his face pixelated but still his, and we'd count down the days while making plans for a beach vacation when he got back. Then came the call. It was 3:42 a.m. when my ringtone cut through sleep like glass shattering. Sometimes I still hear it echoing in my head. The officer's voice was calm, practiced, almost too careful as he told me Daniel had stopped at a small convenience store near his hotel. A robbery. Shots fired. Wrong place, wrong time. My husband didn't make it. That one sentence split my world wide open. Since then, life has been paperwork and court dates, lawyers, counselors, bills I didn't even know existed. Just a blur of grief threaded through endless noise. Ava, my little girl, dreams the same dream every night. Her dad waving at her from a faraway road, headlights swallowing him whole. She wakes screaming and I just gather her against me, whispering promises I don't believe. It's okay. Everything's okay. Except it isn't. By June, when school let out, I was desperate to escape the house, the reminders, the silence that felt louder than any sound. A break, I thought. Somewhere green, somewhere quiet. Somewhere with no ghosts except the ones I already carried. I opened Airbnb, scrolling past sleek apartments and bright city lofts until one caught me. Rustic 2-bedroom cabin, privacy and mountain views. The pictures did it. A cedar cabin tucked deep among pines, porch facing a silver creek, an old swing set leaning into tall grass. The listing said it was about 30 minutes outside a town called Alder Creek, Montana. Nearest neighbor, a mile away. No TV, no Wi-Fi, no distractions, just quiet. Just mountain air. Perfect. I booked 5 nights. We flew from Denver to Missoula, rented a silver Subaru, and drove north under a sky so blue it looked painted. Ava sat in the back seat with her stuffed bunny, tracing cloud shapes against the window. "Do you think there are bears here?" she asked, voice curious but small. "Probably," I said, forcing a smile. "But they don't like people. They'll stay away." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to watching the blur of trees. The highway bled into back roads, then into gravel. My phone lost service about 20 minutes outside Alder Creek. A green road sign appeared, worn but legible. Kerr Ridge, 14 Ming. That was us. The road narrowed, winding between towering pines so thick they swallowed the light. A creek glittered beside us, tumbling over smooth stones. Ava leaned forward, her eyes wide for the first time in months. "It looks like a fairy place," she whispered, pointing at the water. I wish I could bottle that sound. When we finally reached the clearing, my chest loosened like I'd been holding my breath for half a year. The cabin stood on a rise, its honey-colored logs glowing in the afternoon sun. A neat stack of firewood leaned against the porch rail. Off to one side, the old swing swayed faintly in the breeze, blue paint peeling to dull gray. On the door hung a hand-painted sign, "Welcome friends, Mikasa Sukasa." Corny but sweet, the key was waiting in a black lockbox. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. Pine walls glowed golden in the light. A stone fireplace with a half-burned log sitting quiet at its heart. 2 bedrooms opened off a narrow hallway. The kitchen was simple but clean. On the coffee table sat a thin binder titled Cabin Guide and Information by Cliff Hansen. I flipped it open. Cliff Hansen, retired carpenter, local since 1982. House rules, no smoking indoors. Keep food sealed, bears. Leave the key in the lockbox at checkout. No cell service beyond Alder Creek. Emergency landline in the pantry. A final line at the bottom read, "I live 2 ridges over. Might stop by to check the wood stove. Enjoy your stay." I paused at that. A stranger stopping by unannounced would have felt strange back home. But here it made sense. Rural life was different. People looked out for each other. We unpacked, roasted hot dogs on the porch, and watched the sky melt from pink into deep purple. No cars, no voices, just the low hush of the creek and the hum of crickets. When night fell, I lit a fire in the hearth, and Ava curled against me as I read from her favorite book. She was asleep by chapter 3. For the first time in 6 months, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd done the right thing. The next day was simple, almost perfect. We followed the trail down to the creek, skipped stones, ate peanut butter sandwiches on a flat rock. Ava laughed. For the first time in months, I laughed with her. For a few hours, it almost felt like life had clicked back into place. Ava's laugh carried across the creek, my shoulders finally loosened, and for a fleeting moment, I could pretend everything was normal. But by late afternoon, dark clouds muscled in from the west, heavy and bruised. The air shifted, wet earth, sharp ozone, the smell of rain before the first drop even touched the ground. Back at the cabin, I filled the old clawfoot tub, letting Ava splash around with a cracked yellow toy boat we'd found under the sink. Her giggles bounced off the walls, a sound I hadn't heard enough of lately. Then the front door opened. The sound was ordinary, wood against wood, hinges groaning, but it was wrong. My body froze. Then came the heavy thud of boots on the floorboards. "Hello?" A man's voice, deep and gravelly, slid down the hallway. My stomach dropped so hard it hurt. I yanked Ava from the tub, wrapped her in a towel so quickly she squeaked, and stepped into the living room, my pulse hammering against my ribs. A tall man stood by the couch, cap in his hand, his beard grizzled and gray, his face weathered from years of sun and wind. His eyes were slate-colored, cold and wet-looking like storm water. "60s, maybe." "Evening, ma'am," he said with a small nod. "Name's Cliff, owned the place. Storm's blowing in. Figured I'd drop off some dry wood. Make sure you're all settled." His tone was calm, almost fatherly, but my ears were roaring. The listing had mentioned he might stop by, sure, but no knock. No warning. My body screamed danger even as his words tried to sound harmless. "I appreciate it," I said, clutching Ava closer, tightening the towel around her small frame. My voice came out too sharp, too fast. "But next time, please knock." Something flickered across his face. He looked down like a boy caught doing wrong. "Fair enough, ma'am. My apologies." He stacked 4 logs by the fireplace, bent to check the damper, then looked straight at Ava. "You like s'mores?" he asked softly. "Left supplies in the pantry." Ava half hid behind me, gave the smallest nod, and just like that he was gone. His boots crunched on the gravel as fat drops of rain began to spatter the porch. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it left my skin buzzing like I'd been standing too close to a live wire. That night the storm hit with a fury. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the glass in the windows. Wind clawed at the roof. I lay in bed, eyes wide, every muscle taut, listening to Ava's soft snores through the wall. Then I heard it, between thunderclaps, footsteps, slow, heavy, crossing the porch. The boards creaked once, twice, then silence. No knock, no voice. I slipped from bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Every shadow looked wrong as I crept into the living room. Lightning split the sky, white and raw, and for an instant the room lit up like bone. That was long enough. On the couch sat a dark canvas duffel bag, soaking wet. I hadn't left it there. The front door hung open 2 inches. My breath stuttered. I pushed the door shut with shaking hands, turned the lock, and scanned the room. Nothing. No one. Just the hiss of rain sliding down the chimney. I couldn't bring myself to open the bag. Couldn't even touch it. Instead, I bolted to Ava's room, shut her door, and sat on the floor with my hand wrapped around the knob, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. I woke to birdsong, rain dripping from the eaves. Ava stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, can I have cereal?" "Stay here," I whispered. The living room was empty. The duffel bag gone. So was the stack of firewood Cliff had left. The door was shut, but a single muddy boot print marked the threshold. Outside, the gravel driveway gleamed, scrubbed almost clean by rain. No footprints, no tire tracks, but behind the cabin, under Ava's window, I found them. 3 cigarette butts crushed flat on a rock. 2 empty beer cans leaned against a tree. The binder had said no smoking on the property. I didn't hesitate. I scrawled a note, emergency. Had to leave early. We packed in under 10 minutes. Ava didn't even complain. She could feel it too, the weight in the air. By 8 a.m. we were bouncing down the gravel road. My knuckles were white on the wheel. 10 minutes later, the road climbed a rise. I glanced back in the rearview mirror. A green pickup had pulled into the clearing. 2 men stood by the porch. One wore a baseball cap. The other was tall, broad, with a silver beard. Both stood still, watching us, their faces unreadable, until the trees swallowed them from sight. I floored the gas. Gravel spat behind the tires. I didn't ease off until the highway appeared and my phone lit up with a single, blessed bar of service. I called my sister from a gas station in Alder Creek while Ava ate a chocolate donut, hands sticky with sugar. I reported the listing to Airbnb. They refunded the stay, suspended the account. The sheriff's office said they'd take a look. No one ever called back, but I keep thinking about that duffel bag. What was inside? Rope, tools, nothing at all, it doesn't matter. Someone had been inside that cabin with us, watching. Now when Ava asks about going to the mountains again, I tell her maybe someday. But if we do, it'll be a hotel with cameras, neighbors, and cell service. Because out there in those woods, no one could have heard me if I screamed. And that thought has kept me awake every single night since.